The world watched with bated breath in May 2025 as old rivals India and Pakistan engaged in their most dangerous confrontation in decades. The specter of nuclear war, a horrifying possibility that has haunted the Indian subcontinent for over half a century, loomed larger than ever. While the immediate crisis has subsided, the underlying tensions remain, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in a region armed with the most destructive weapons known to mankind. The recent conflict, sparked by a deadly terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, quickly spiraled into a dangerous exchange of airstrikes and artillery fire. Adding to the global anxiety was Pakistan's thinly veiled nuclear signaling, a tactic it has employed with increasing frequency in recent years. This dangerous game of brinkmanship has raised serious questions about the viability of nuclear deterrence and the potential for catastrophic miscalculation. The stakes in this volatile region could not be higher. Both India and Pakistan possess sophisticated nuclear arsenals capable of unimaginable destruction. The consequences of even a limited nuclear exchange would be devastating, not just for the two countries directly involved, but for the entire world. The international community must engage with both sides to de-escalate tensions and prevent a future crisis that could have unthinkable consequences. On April 22, 2025, a terrorist attack in Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir shocked India. Initially claimed by Lashkar-e-Taiba, the attack raised fears of a violent summer. Though Lit retracted its claim, the damage was done. Civilian casualties ignited tensions, setting the stage for escalation. India vowed a swift response, frustrated by Pakistan's perceived support for terrorism. The attack pressured the Indian government to act forcefully. The international community condemned the attack but urged restraint, fearing a repeat of the Balakot crisis. The attack highlighted Kashmir's volatile security situation. It underscored the complex world of South Asian militancy. The attack reminded of the persistent threat of terrorism and potential conflict. On May 7, 2025, India launched a series of airstrikes against what it claimed were terrorist training camps inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The operation, dubbed Operation Sindoor, marked a significant escalation in the conflict and signaled India's growing impatience with cross-border terrorism. The strikes, carried out by fighter jets and drones, were the first such incursion into Pakistan-administered territory since the Balakot airstrikes of 2019. India was careful to characterize the strikes as non-military, preemptive action targeting terrorist infrastructure and avoiding civilian casualties. The strikes, while strategically significant, were also calibrated to send a message of resolve without triggering an all-out war. India's message to Pakistan was clear. It would no longer tolerate cross-border terrorism and was willing to use force to defend its interests. The international response to Operation Sindoor was mixed. While some countries expressed understanding for India's position, others condemned the use of force and urged both sides to exercise restraint. The United States, walking a diplomatic tightrope, called for de-escalation while also acknowledging India's right to self-defense. The strikes once again highlighted the precarious balance of power in South Asia, and the constant risk of escalation in a region rife with historical grievances and mistrust. Pakistan, caught off guard by the scale and audacity of India's airstrikes, responded with a mix of fury and defiance. Denying the existence of any terrorist camps within its territory, Pakistan condemned the strikes as an act of unprovoked aggression and vowed to retaliate at a time and place of its choosing. Pakistan also launched its own airstrikes against targets in Indian-administered Kashmir, raising fears of an uncontrolled escalation. Adding to the tension were reports of Pakistan's Prime Minister convening an emergency meeting of the National Command Authority, the body responsible for the country's nuclear arsenal. While Pakistan denied the reports, the mere suggestion of nuclear deliberations sent shockwaves through the international community. This was not the first time Pakistan had resorted to nuclear signaling during a crisis with India, a tactic widely condemned as irresponsible and dangerous. Pakistan's response to Operation Sindoor followed a familiar pattern of brinkmanship and nuclear saber-rattling. This strategy, while seemingly effective in deterring a full-scale Indian invasion, has also drawn criticism for lowering the threshold for nuclear conflict. The repeated use of nuclear rhetoric, experts warn, risks normalizing the unthinkable and increasing the chances of miscalculation or accident. Section 5. The Nuclear Chessboard, Doctrines and Capabilities. The recent crisis once again brought into sharp focus the nuclear dimensions of the India-Pakistan rivalry. Both countries possess sophisticated nuclear arsenals and subscribe to different doctrines that govern their potential use. Understanding these doctrines and capabilities is crucial to comprehending the dynamics of deterrence and the risks of escalation in South Asia. India, which first tested a nuclear device in 1974, maintains a no-first-use policy, pledging to only use nuclear weapons in retaliation to a nuclear attack. Pakistan, which conducted its first nuclear tests in 1998, has adopted a more ambiguous posture, refusing to rule out the first use of nuclear weapons, particularly in response to a conventional attack that threatens its existential survival. This difference in doctrines lies at the heart of the strategic instability in the region. While India possesses a larger and more diverse nuclear arsenal, Pakistan has focused on developing tactical nuclear weapons, designed for use on the battlefield. This development has further complicated the strategic calculus, raising fears that a conventional conflict could escalate into a limited nuclear exchange. The lack of transparency surrounding both countries' nuclear doctrines and capabilities only adds to the uncertainty and the risk of misperception. Section 6. China's Tightrope Walk Balancing Act in a Volatile Region. The recent India-Pakistan crisis presented a delicate challenge for China, a close ally of Pakistan. China's strategic interests meant it could not remain a passive observer. Beijing walked a diplomatic tightrope, supporting its ally without exacerbating tensions. China's response was marked by restraint and calculated ambiguity. It called for dialogue and restraint from both sides. This balancing act aimed to avoid conflict and protect its economic ambitions. The crisis highlighted the complexities of China's role in South Asia. Section 7. The International Community. A muted response to a dire threat. The international community's response to the recent India-Pakistan crisis was marked by a sense of alarm and a flurry of diplomatic activity, but ultimately lacked the urgency and decisiveness that the situation demanded. While world leaders expressed concern and called for restraint, there was no concerted effort to mediate between the two nuclear-armed rivals or address the underlying causes of the conflict. The muted response was partly due to the speed with which the crisis unfolded, leaving little time for diplomatic maneuvering. However, it also reflected a certain degree of fatigue and resignation within the international community regarding the intractable nature of the India-Pakistan dispute. The fact that this was not the first time the two countries had come close to war, coupled with the lack of progress on resolving the underlying Kashmir issue, contributed to a sense of helplessness. The international community's failure to effectively address the recent crisis is a worrying sign, highlighting the limitations of existing mechanisms for conflict prevention and resolution. The crisis underscores the need for a more proactive and sustained international effort to mediate between India and Pakistan, promote dialogue, and build trust. Failure to do so risks a future conflict with potentially catastrophic consequences. Section 8. The Perils of Brinkmanship. Lessons from History. The recent India-Pakistan crisis, with its echoes of past confrontations, offers a sobering reminder of the perils of brinkmanship in a nuclear-armed world. History is replete with examples of crises that spiraled out of control, often due to miscalculation, misperception, or simply bad luck. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war, stands as a stark testament to the fragility of peace in the nuclear age. The India-Pakistan conflict is further complicated by the presence of non-state actors, such as terrorist groups, which can exploit the existing tensions to their advantage. The Pahalgam attack, regardless of who was ultimately responsible, demonstrated how easily such an incident could trigger a chain of events with potentially catastrophic consequences. The use of terrorist proxies adds an unpredictable and highly dangerous element to an already volatile mix. The lessons of history are clear. Brinkmanship is a dangerous game, particularly when nuclear weapons are involved. The risks of miscalculation, accident, or unintended escalation are simply too high. Both India and Pakistan must recognize that their security and prosperity lie in peaceful coexistence, not in perpetuating a cycle of mistrust and hostility. Section 9. The Path Forward, Towards a More Stable Future. The road to lasting peace in South Asia is long, but dialogue and de-escalation are crucial. Both nations must recognize the unsustainable status quo and engage in unconditional dialogue. Addressing the Kashmir dispute is essential for lasting peace. The international community must support this dialogue. Regional organizations can promote cooperation and reduce conflict risks. The stakes are too high to allow mistrust and hostility to continue.